I recently came face to face with every homeowner's worst nightmare. A corrupt, power-hungry HOA president tried to have my father's vintage 1972 Ford truck towed right off my own property. Her excuse: it was an eyesore that violated community standards. She made up. But she made one critical mistake. She wasn't just harassing some helpless rancher. She was targeting a special agent for the FBI on active leave. My name is Trevor Daniels. My wife, Linda, and I bought our 100-acre ranch here in Texas Hill Country to finally find some peace after I spent 20 years chasing down the country's most dangerous criminals. Part of that peace was having my father's old truck with me. It's a sun-faded red F-100, and it was my last real connection to him. It just sits quietly under an old oak tree, hundreds of yards from the property line of a new housing development called Oak Creek Meadows. The trouble started with a letter from their HOA president, a woman named Karen Smay. She demanded I remove the derelict vehicle within 14 days or face property remediation. I pretty much ignored it because my ranch isn't even part of their HOA. We were grandfathered out decades ago. But Karen, as I would soon learn, was not used to hearing the word no. A week later, two goons in cheap HOA security shirts showed up at my front gate. One of them, a guy named Hosea, who tried to act like some kind of commando, threatened to move the truck himself if I didn't comply. I warned them to stay off my land, but that just seemed to make Karen even more determined to escalate things. On a Thursday morning, the roar of a heavy engine woke us up. I looked out the window and saw a massive tow truck backing across my lawn, crushing Linda's beautiful flower beds. Haas and his sidekick, Zip, were there with a fake removal order, looking smug. I walked out.com on the outside, but my training was kicking in. I was focused. I told them to leave. Haas just sneered at me and told the driver to hook up the Ford. That was the line. He crossed it. I reached into my back pocket and flipped open my black leather wallet. The gold FBI shield flashed in the bright morning sun. Haas froze mid-sentence. His arrogant, flushed face went from red to a pasty, chalky white as his eyes darted across the words. Federal Bureau of Investigation. Interfering with a federal officer. Attempted grand theft and conspiracy. I told him, my voice flat and even. You have 5 seconds to get off my grass before I make a call that brings people with real guns. You've never seen two guys scramble so fast. They practically fell over each other getting back to their car. The tow truck driver didn't even wait to get paid. He just threw his truck in gear and hauled out of there, leaving tire tracks across my lawn. But Karen Smay still didn't learn her lesson. A few days later, she set up an illegal security checkpoint on the public county road that leads to my ranch, stopping cars and harassing my neighbors. When I drove up to it, I just rolled down my window, put my phone on speaker, and called 911. I calmly reported them for illegally obstructing a public thoroughfare. Once again, they fled before the sheriff arrived. At that point, I knew Karen would make this personal. It was time for Linda and me to go on the offensive. As a former agent, I know how to build a case from the ground up. Linda and I started digging. We pulled public records, followed the money trail, and interviewed disgruntled homeowners. It didn't take long to uncover Karen's entire scheme. She was funneling HOA dues into shell companies that she owned for bogus security and landscaping services. She wasn't a community leader. She was an embezzler, running a racket. The final showdown happened a week later. Karen showed up at my ranch herself, dressed in a ridiculous white pantsuit, flanked by Haas and some new, hired muscle. She demanded to conduct an inspection of my barn. When her new goon tried to physically shove me aside to get past me, my training took over instantly. I pivoted, used his own momentum against him, and put him in a wrist lock that had him down on his knees in the dirt in less than a second. I carry zip ties in my truck, so I secured his hands behind his back, right there. Karen started shrieking that I had no authority to do that. So, I took out my phone again and put my field office on speaker. Agent Daniels, badge 7539, I said clearly. Suspect in custody for assault on a federal officer, requesting backup at my location. The silence that followed was beautiful. All the color drained from Karen's face. The sirens arrived in minutes, and it wasn't just the local sheriff. Two dark, unmarked federal sedans pulled up, and my colleagues from the bureau stepped out, ready to take over the scene. Karen's face was a mask of pure horror as she heard the cold metallic click of real handcuffs around her wrists. We had her dead to rights on wire fraud, mail fraud, and extortion. Her entire criminal enterprise, the little beige empire she built by bullying her neighbors, came crashing down. The government repossessed everything. Now, the ranch is quiet again. The new HOA board sent us a formal letter of apology. People in the neighborhood are finally planting flowers in their yards instead of hiding behind security cameras. I'm back to mending fences and working on my old tractor. And my father's truck, it still sits right there, under that old oak tree, faded red symbol that some things are worth standing your ground for. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to subscribe to Best with B12 for more.